They thought he was just another man walking through Charles de Gaulle Airport, tired, quiet, unremarkable. No entourage, no visible security, no flashing cameras. Just a man in a camouflage uniform, red beret tucked neatly beneath his arm, and a calm, unreadable gaze. But in less than 60 seconds, the entire airport would fall silent. One sentence changed everything. A French police officer stopped him at the checkpoint. "Passport, monsieur," the officer said, scanning him. From head to toe, the man handed it over without a word. The officer flipped through the pages, paused, then frowned. "You're military. What's your business in France?" There was no arrogance in the man's voice, no anger, just clarity. "I'm the president of Burkina Faso." The officer blinked. He looked at the passport again. The name matched. The face matched. The rank was real. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a head of state. Early spring in Paris, tourists snapping selfies, police posted casually at transit hubs. Then a black SUV rolled up to the curb of a government building. No French plates, no flashing flags. Just one man stepped out, military fatigues, red beret, and an aura of quiet power. He wasn't there to be seen, but he was impossible to ignore. An officer at the checkpoint spotted him and raised a hand. "Stop right there. Identification." The man paused and handed over his passport. He didn't speak, he didn't explain, simply waited. Another officer joined. "Your business here?" His tone carried suspicion, assumption, the kind that grows when people expect obedience instead of answers. But the man said nothing. A third officer radioed him back up. It was becoming a scene. People stopped. Phones came out. The man just stood still, moved, unreadable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift his weight. He just waited. That kind of calm unnerves people. Senior officer stepped forward, agitated. "You think you can just walk in here dressed like this?" And finally, the man responded. "I am President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso." There was no emphasis. No bravado, just fact. Everything stopped. The radios stopped crackling. The side conversations went mute. A junior officer looked down at the passport again, his face visibly flushed. A third stepped back. They had just detained a sitting African president in front of everyone. One of them started to stammer an apology. "Monsieur le Président, we didn't know." Traoré didn't respond. He didn't need to. Adjusted his sleeves, nodded once, and walked through the checkpoint. No drama, no retaliation, just presence, and that was louder than any argument. Within hours, news spread across French agencies. The foreign ministry scrambled. Diplomatic statement was issued. They called it a misunderstanding. But the footage had already gone viral. Hashtags exploded across West Africa. Hashtag respect Traoré. Hashtag African dignity. Hashtag he is the president. In cafes, from Ouagadougou to Dakar, people watched and nodded. They weren't surprised. They were reminded. Because this wasn't about one man getting stopped. This was about decades of being underestimated, ignored. Misjudged Traoré. Didn't he need a limousine? He didn't need an introduction. Carried his title in silence and made them feel the weight of their assumptions. This wasn't a scandal. It was a mirror. One that reflected how systems still expect power to look a certain way. A suit, a translator, an assistant with documents. But not a 35-year-old African president in boots and camouflage, walking alone. And that's what made this moment historic. It wasn't just that Traoré was disrespected. It was that he chose not to correct them until the moment mattered most. He didn't demand anything. He let the silence grow. And then, with 7 words, he rewrote the energy in the room. "I am President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso." That's not a correction. That's a reckoning. In the days that followed, French media spun the story carefully. They highlighted the professionalism of the police. They mentioned protocol. They mentioned security concerns. But what they didn't mention was how often real power is dismissed because it doesn't look familiar. Traoré leads like a soldier, not a politician. Now that's his choice. He doesn't need the red carpet. He doesn't need the gold pin. He's the kind of leader who speaks last and moves first. And when he walks into a room, he doesn't have to raise his voice to be heard. The African response was clear. The moment wasn't an embarrassment. It was a symbol of a continent tired of proving itself, tired of asking for respect, ready to demand it silently, forcefully, and without apology. People won't forget what happened that day in Paris. Not because of how loud it got, but because of how quiet. "It was Traoré," said one sentence. That was enough. And sometimes, real power doesn't need a second line. If you felt that moment hit deep, if you believe dignity doesn't need to shout, then you're in the right place. Tap like to show respect. Hit subscribe to never miss a story that mainstream media won't show you. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, because the roar of the Black Lion of Africa echoes across the globe.